right, let's bring him in. Robert Smith, Euclid High School fame, Ohio State Buckeye fame, Minnesota Vikings fame, ESPN fame. How are you, my brother? It's great to see you again. It's been way too long.
It's been way too long. So good to see you, man. I love the format of the show, and I got to tell you, I don't know who put the gopher in front of the desk, but that's the best move that you guys made.
I know. Doesn't it work, Mike? Or Robert, it really works. I think it was Mikey McNuggets, our producer. Oh, no, it was Anthony.
It was Anthony.
Anthony
Steve,
brought in
take
the
the
gopher.
shot.
All right.
There he is.
Anthony, our associate producer.
I was just playing that clip for the kids a couple of weeks ago where he's coming out of the ground coughing after Bill Murray tried to blow up the golf.
It's fantastic.
He starts dancing again.
Never lets you down. Never
you
lets
got
you
Bill
down.
Murray, you got Aykroyd, you got Rodney Dangerfield.
One of the all-time classic sports comedies in my mind. Hey, Robert, first of all, we're going to get to the Brown stuff and all of that, but I really want to start with you with Ohio State. So much in the way of expectations for this team this year. And I don't know if you're like me, but when I see that they're the favorite to win the national championship, or they're mentioned by, I get nervous. I don't know, how do you feel about that? And
They're there every year. They're in the
not
mix.
every year. Not every year. They're always like in the top 5. But this year I'm seeing way too many guys pick them to win it all, and that makes me nervous. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think when you look at college football over the last decade or so, I mean, who's it going to be? Who are people going to pick? They're going to pick Clemson. They're going to pick Ohio State. They're going to pick Georgia. They're going to pick Alabama. And obviously having C.J. Stroud back and this team the way that it is, and the hopes, especially for the defensive side of the ball. And I think part of this has to be the current structure of the Big Ten. Obviously losing to Michigan last year, but I think that people look at Ohio State and they look at the path to the playoffs and to a potential national championship, and they see it as being easier, and I think that that's probably fair, inside of the Big Ten than coming from the SEC, for example.
I got to tell you guys, like, Robert, I'm someone, and these guys know this, but like, I grew up in New York City. I'm 50 years old. So, like, where I grew up, nobody cared about college football. There's no good teams in New York. Nobody cared. And so, like, moving to, and then when I started my career, I was working in near Syracuse. And so we got it, even though their football sucks, but they were all right back in those days. Who was their coach again? They had that one coach.
Don McPherson, right?
Paul Pasqualoni.
Pasqualoni after McPherson.
I was always screaming that he should be fired, even though he's the best coach they've ever had. What an idiot I was. But, like, my beef with college football these days, even though I like watching individual games and the good matchups, is just what you said. It's like, who are you going to pick? Jay's like, I'm nervous. They're number 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, they're in the mix every year.
They're number 1 this year.
There's like 4 every year. There's like 5, maybe 6 teams at the most that you really think can win a national title. Every once in a while, there's a team that comes out of nowhere, but they almost never win. I find the lack of diversity in winning
LSU
to be
isn't in
boring.
that top 4. LSU won.
It's very rare, though.
Yeah, but okay. So I think first of all, the NIL is going to change things, and we've already started to see this. I mean, look at Texas A&M here over the last couple of years, and I know Nick Saban got in a lot of trouble with Jimbo Fisher saying that he bought that roster. But you look at the season that they had last year, and then you go out and you have the number 1 recruiting class ever.
Good.
The highest rated recruiting class ever. The change is going to start. Yes, are some of these rosters going to be quote-unquote bought? Yeah, possibly. Look at what happened with USC, bringing in Lincoln Riley and getting Caleb Williams from Oklahoma. We're going to see teams be able to do what teams can do in the NFL, and that's kind of go to a form of free agency, improve their roster quickly, and improve their team quickly. So I think some of those other teams are going to be in the mix. So it'll be interesting to see what A&M does this year. I'll be very interested to see what USC does this year, to see if they can get their name back in that mix. And it wasn't that long ago when you're talking about Reggie Bush and Pete Carroll and Matt Leinart, just how dominant USC was. Yeah. And, of course, having the trouble that Reggie Bush got in, hurt that program for a while. But I think that the landscape can change. Yes, it's been kind of the same names over the last decade, but we're going to see, especially with NIL, I believe that's going to change.
I hope so. That's great.
Robert, you talked about it. It's so ironic. You said, Reggie Bush got in trouble.
Right, for doing nothing.
And then, so like now, Reggie Bush got in trouble for what he would be applauded for today. Like, oh, go get that,
Jim
man.
Tressel got fired for nothing.
Jim Tressel and Terrell Pryor got tattoos. That's so crazy that they lost eligibility and couldn't even come back on campus. I want to ask you this question. How long before it's just straight up like this? We're just going to pay every player X amount of dollars to come play here, and that's what it is. And they're going to just have a pay scale in college football.
Well, this is the thing that I always thought was a better solution. I always thought NIL was a better solution because I think there's a whole can of worms that people aren't considering when you're talking about the university actually paying players, because then they become employees. Then there are tax exemption issues from the state that come into play. And then if they're employees, can you fire them? So I think that the solution now, having entities outside of the university allowing the players to reap the benefits of name, image, and likeness is a much better model. And I have absolutely no problem with it. Would have loved it back in my day. And it's so funny.
Yeah.
Jay, you know how this is, man. Like, so many players are like, "Hey, Robert, we know you took a pay cut when you came to the NFL." I kid you not. I got my first car 5 months before I got drafted, and it broke down 3 months before I got drafted. and now you got Bijan Robinson down there at Texas, and he's driving around in a Lamborghini. So I got no problem with it. But I will say this, and this is where I differ with some people, like the Reggie Bush situation. People are saying, hey, he should get his Heisman back, and my problem with that is people that broke the rule at that time. First of all, there are a lot of us that didn't. A lot of us that didn't break the rules, okay? So we were living the right way. I would have loved to have my mother taken care of back then, but I didn't, okay? Because I wasn't following the rule, or I was following the rules, and I didn't want the university or other players that came after me, if I broke the rules, to get in trouble. And that's unfortunately what happened in Reggie Bush's situation. Look what happened to USC because of those rules. And we could say right now, yes, the amateurism rules should have been different, and players should have been able to earn money on name, image, and likeness. But those were the rules then, and you broke the rules then. So I have no problem with the Heisman Trust saying, shouldn't get your Heisman Trophy back.
Yeah.
Robert, you was great at Ohio State. I think you had the Ohio State freshman record with over 1,100 yards. What's your thoughts of TreVeyon Henderson? He was a freshman last season. Do you think he'll be featured a lot in this high-power passing offense? Do you think we'll see him break any rushing records at Ohio State?
Oh man, I love watching TreVeyon run, and this is the thing. Like, the game is just so different now. Like, because of the pass sets you have a lot of empty sets. You get a lot of people removed from the box, but he also can do that himself. He can line up in the backfield. He can split out and create some mismatch problems when you have a linebacker or a bigger player that needs to separate from the line of scrimmage with him. He is just so much fun to watch. But this offense in general is just so much fun to watch. And we talk about the crazy things that Ohio State has done over the last couple of years. And you're basically talking about three straight Ohio State players that got drafted in the first round. And I know that the kid from Alabama, that he transferred out. And you still have a loaded wide receiver core. So, TreVeyon's just going to be another great piece to that puzzle. But I'm excited to see what he can do, because I think he just scratched the surface. And as a running back, I think the more reps you get, the more times you see things, especially after that freshman year, there tends to be a dramatic incline, just because when you're first seeing that speed at that highest level, it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily a shock, but it takes some getting used to. So I think he's going to be even better this year.
Wow.
Robert, nowadays we see players more often retire when they're still good. But I think back to when you did it, I think back to when Barry Sanders did it, or even a little more recently when Calvin Johnson retired in the prime of his career, and Andrew Luck, of course, famously retired. correct me if I'm wrong, I believe like your last year in the league, I think was your best statistical season, if I remember. Like there was no decline. It wasn't even like, hey, it started to go over the cliff a little bit. Talk about that decision, and did you ever regret it?
Well, for me, it really wasn't as difficult as it seemed on the outside. And you're right. My last season was my best season in the league, but it was also the only season that I didn't miss any games. So,
right.
My first 4 years in the league, and in particular my rookie season, I did some damage to my right knee when I tore my ACL. Also cracked the bottom of the femur. Did some damage to the articular surfaces, some cartilage that got damaged then, and that required some microfracture surgeries later. So I had to have those twice, including after that last season. So here it is, my last season. Don't miss any games for the first time, have my best statistical season, and I still needed knee surgery after the year. And I was like, I'm going to be one of those 45-year-old knee replacement guys. And like you, I sit here at 50 years old now, and I haven't had a knee replacement yet. Feel really good. When I push it a little bit too much, if I, especially trying to ski, something stupid like that.
Oh my gosh!
I might get some swelling in the knee, but other than that, it's pretty good. But I have to ask. So, being a New York guy, are you a Giants fan?
No, it's bizarre. I mean, I grew up in New York. I rooted for the Cubs. I rooted for the Bengals. I was a Bengals fan growing up in New York.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bizarre. Even though I could never watch them, like I never, because I didn't have cable till I was an adult. So I could never watch. I don't even know if they were on cable, but I never watched the Cubs and Bengals unless they were playing the Jets, the Giants, or the Mets. But yeah, I grew up rooting for all these weird. The only New York team I ever rooted for was St. John's in basketball. That was my team, but that's it.
Well, the regret part of it, regret part of the question. My last game was 41-0 when we lost to the Giants in the NFC Championship game.
Yep.
So 2 out of my last 3 seasons, the season ended with us losing in the championship game. Of course, after the '98 season, we had gone 15-1 in the regular season and then lost to the Falcons in the NFC Championship game. The regret was, and this is the things that they say, that regret for the things that you do can be tempered with time, and those things get easier to deal with. But regret for the things that you fail to do is inconsolable. Mm-hmm. And so I never won a championship. Never made it to the big game. Yeah. But at the same time, when I think about the decision to walk away from the game, it was it's better to walk away early than to limp away late. And even though I didn't have any of those championships, and it still stings to a degree, the knee feels much better than it probably should after all the damage that it
no doubt.
Years and years.
Robert, this is kind of funny you say that. You said ACL, me and Jay turned around and looked at each other. I think we have 5 ACL reconstructions between the both of us. And when you said you were skiing, I looked around and said, "What you doing? What? Like skiing? That's one of the worst things you can do,
especially with microfracture."
Yeah, that ain't no thing, man. Like that's crazy. Now, you did pre-med, right?
I was going to say real quick. So it was the ACL on the right knee in '93, and then I had a high ankle sprain before. They talked about them as high ankle sprains. Gilbert Brown, you remember, big defensive tackle from Green, fell on it. I'm lucky that I didn't do more damage to it with Big Gill falling on it. But then in '96. Before they had horse collar, Walt Harris, Monday Night Football, man, and tore my MCL and PCL on the left knee. So my first 4 years in the league, man, was injured almost all the time. Last 4 years, relatively healthy, but I feel great considering all that stuff.
Just hearing him talk about that, my knee started swelling. Just a little bit. I can feel the swelling, Robert. Hey, Robert, I got to get your thoughts on USC and UCLA. Man, what happened to our old Big Ten?
It's so crazy. Like even thinking back a year ago when they were talking about Oklahoma and Texas going into the SEC, it was like, are you kidding me? This is like really happening. And then I remember the morning that this was going down, I was on Twitter, and I saw Brady Quinn. All he had tweeted was the big eyeballs looking, you know. and then I saw Leinart doing it, and I'm thinking, man, I can't wait to find out what this is. And like at first, I'm thinking, you know, maybe it's a big Saturday kickoff announcement, like who's going to be joining the desk or something like that. No way in the world was I thinking that it was going to be USC and UCLA. And you know, I think back to my recruiting, and you know, USC, UCLA were both two schools that I considered. I considered USC twice. I went back out there after I said I'll be here at Ohio State. But I think it's just unbelievable for the Big Ten, and I think it's going to be great for those programs. And I'm just excited to see the way that it all shakes out and kind of where the last dominoes are going to fall. Like this definitely isn't over. You know, I know that the Pac-12 and the Big 12 that they haven't decided to actually do anything official together. But obviously, when you're looking at programs like Oregon, you're looking at programs like Washington, and of course now Notre Dame. You know, just they're trying to get NBC to back up, you know, that $75 million Brinks truck each year. I'm just interested to see where the rest of this goes. And I'm like one of those people. I know people, some are like, the tradition. Like, it's change, and it's not always a bad thing. And I think it generally ends up being a lot different and a lot better than people expect.
Man, look at that picture there. Robert Smith all suited up.
Hey, Robert, I'm curious.
I think I had some of the spray on the top.
Yeah. I'm not going to mention any names, but we had a conversation on the set about that a while ago.
You got to get it going.
Hey, I wanted to get Robert. I wanted your thoughts on the Browns' backfield because, you know.
Oh man.
I mean, it's amazing the talent we look at a guy like Dearness Johnson, who's the third back. When he got his chance last year, he looked awesome.
It's unbelievable. You know, of course, covering college football, when you get to see these guys at the college level and then you get to see them make that transition. I mean, we know that, you know, Nick at Georgia and Georgia, they produce all those backs. But then to have Kareem Hunt in that backfield, I think the interesting thing this season, you know, especially in consideration of what's probably going to be at least some sort of suspension for Deshaun Watson at the beginning of the year, is Jacoby Brissett, you know, was kind of getting comfortable in the offense with everything that's going on. You know, are you going to see Hunt and Chubb in the backfield together? I think there could be some really interesting possibilities. And I know Kevin Stefanski, you know, when he was, I met him up here. I'm up here in Minnesota, by the way, right now. And I met him when he was up here as the offensive coordinator. He's obviously got a great offensive mind. He's got some incredible pieces back there. Those guys are just so dangerous. And what makes those guys so fun to watch, you know, as a running back, you just love to see these things. You know, they both have that combination where they've got that speed, they've got that elusive ability, but they also have that ability to just lower that shoulder, man. It's that proverbial bowling ball covered with butcher knives, and they can just level tacklers, and that's fun to watch because they leave guys guessing because you just don't know. If you've got somebody that has that kind of lateral movement, that kind of speed, that kind of breakaway speed, but that kind of power, they can really put people on their heels.
You know, Robert, one of the things that they give you credit for is being a great running back, but you don't get the credit for being probably one of the smartest players ever to come out of Ohio State, right? In terms of now, I believe you were pre-med, or were you going to be a surgeon of some sort? How did you manage that, your workload, your case study, and playing football at the same time? And did you have any issues with that? At Ohio State, being able to, like, you know, stay on track to, you know, have your ultimate goal is going to the pros, but also having that backup plan in school too.
Yeah, so it was interesting. You know, the story has been told and retold and kind of distorted over the years, but there was no pre-med major at Ohio State. But the head of the cancer hospital, David Schuler, at the time, was kind of my unofficial advisor. And he said, look, the medical schools are looking for more well-rounded students. So I think you should major in humanities. So I majored in history, but I had to take all the biology, all the chemistry, all the physics to be able to apply to medical school someday. It's not something that I ended up doing, but I'm excited that I stayed in the healthcare space. I started a company in the digital healthcare space called Fan Huddle, and we're getting ready to launch a number of really exciting projects right now. But at the time, it definitely was difficult. And in my second year, I had an issue with a coach that had a problem with me missing practice to attend a class. So that's the reason that I sat out my second year at Ohio State, and I ended up, as I said before, going to revisit USC, but I also visited Stanford. And the head coach at Stanford at that time was Denny Green, and he and his staff were going to be going to take the Vikings job the next year. And it's funny, I ended up going back to Ohio State, playing one more year, but then I got drafted in 1993. And I remember getting that call from Denny Green that day, and he said, hey, I let you get away once. I'm not going to let it happen. It's funny how things work out, right?
Robert, you know, you go down as being the guy who coined the phrase, the Ohio State University. You know,
That's right.
Do you get money from like shirts and stuff? Because they should. I literally just bought one the other day that says the.
Well, you know what's funny? So I would always go back in the off season to work out at Ohio State. Dave Kennedy was the strength conditioning coach. He had a great career. You know, he ended up going to Pitt. He was there with Larry Fitzgerald. He was at Texas A&M with Von Miller. I remember he was telling me about Von Miller before anybody was talking about him. He was like, Robert, he looked like Neo. Like he was moving like the Matrix. Like I'd never seen him. And I believe he ended up being the strength conditioning coach with Tampa Bay most recently. But it was a big group of us that we would go back and work out. So Eddie George was back there, Raymond, myself, Joey Galloway. But anyhow, we would go back there in the off season, and they said to us when we were back there, hey, they decided to emphasize the official name of the university, which is the Ohio State University. So when I went back to Minnesota, of course, you know, I was talking to Chris Carter about it. So I may get the credit from some circles, but I don't remember who officially actually said it on Monday Night Football first. But Chris and I started doing it on Monday Night Football that season.
And the rest is history. Yeah. And now they've. I think they try to trademark the word "the." Yeah. And now they did. They did.
So they just did like 2 weeks ago.
They finally successfully did that. I think a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean the university needs that money desperately.
Yeah, they do. They need a bake sale.
How are they going to survive?
Hey, Robert. Every time we spoke when we worked together, I would always make it a point because I know how much you love fatherhood and how proud you are to be a dad. And because it's been a while and I haven't had an update, and I so loved hearing you speak about your kids, I need an update. Being a father still the greatest thing you've ever experienced? And just fill us in a little bit about your life and how things are now.
Well, I think you know that it never changes. You know, once you become a father, that love of parenthood never changes. And you know, now my daughter's 12 and my son's 10, and you know what they say, Jay, nothing makes you feel older than your friend's kids, right?
So true.
Because you have those checkups, you know, and those check-ins, and they're not as often, and then you're like, wait a second, this kid was just, you know, in kindergarten, you know, now they're driving. But you know, my daughter has become a music fan. It's just unbelievable. She's an incredible artist. She got her first vinyl about 3 months ago, and it's American Idiot. So it's Green Day, and so we're going up to Lollapalooza next weekend in Chicago. So we're going to go see Green Day up there. And my son, and you know what's strange? They're both lefties. So like just like my mother, left-handed and blue eyes. So you know the legacy of my mom there. So my son, he's been in and out of baseball, you know, with COVID, it kind of disrupted his baseball career. But towards the end of this baseball season, you know, I started to tell him more and more about, like, look, you're left-handed. It's rare. We got to try and get you into pitching. But he's just having fun right now. But it's great that they both love to read. Neither one of them is that much into sports right now. But you know how it is, man. You love them for who they are, and you know, you just try and instill values in them that, you know, whatever you do, work hard at it.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask.
Their loves become your loves. Robert, before we let you go, we want to cross paths with a mutual friend. I think you know who we're talking about. Leroy Hoard on the program now. So once again, we have a Buckeye and a Wolverine.
Hey!
Hey! What's up, Juice?
What's up, Bill? Hey, and you guys, I think you guys know this. And wait a second, this is the first. Somebody got in a word before Leroy. But hey, so Scotty Graham was running back at Ohio State. I think you guys know, and he's now the running back coach down there at the University of Arizona. I mean, he was like the Mike Tyson of talking. And man, when he got up around Leroy put him to shame. It was unbelievable. He had Scotty Graham cowering like, oh my God. Hey, in all seriousness though, like Leroy coming in there to Minnesota, you know, I was getting hurt all the time, and I'm thankful that I was getting hurt because I had a chance to meet Leroy, who's still you know, one of my very best friends. And man, it was just a pleasure playing with you. And before you were on, Leroy, we were talking about Nick Chubb, and we were talking about Kareem Hunt, and you know, we were talking about the running backs, and maybe you didn't have as much lateral movement as those guys do, but it was always so much fun to watch you run, man, because like nobody ran harder. And it was the funniest thing in the world to see defenders try and stop a guy that wasn't interested in being stopped.
Hey, I tell you what, the cool thing about playing with Robert is we watch film together, we learned the playbook together, and when we got to the game, we all knew our roles, right? To the point where the coach didn't even have to tell us when to go in the game. We knew. Me and Robert probably more than any two other running backs knew our situation, knew when it was our play, and knew when we had done it too long and had to change it up. So I remember one time Robert said, "Let me get that goal line." Go ahead. go ahead, play it. The goal line is no joke.
And you know,
it's
it's
a
funny.
Whole bunch of space.
So Leroy is the reason that I own an NFL record that will never be broken. Never.
Ooh.
And the longest average touchdown run for a player with more than 20 touchdowns. And I'm like above 26 yards per touchdown.
Oh my God.
And,
wow.
And second place is Barry Sanders at like 16. And it's because as soon as I got to the 10-yard line, Leroy's right. I'd start jogging to the sideline. Leroy pound that thing in. Like, okay, now I don't have that 1 yard, 2 yard touchdown.
Yeah. Wow.
That's a great record, though.
That's hilarious.
And the funny thing about it is, I don't think anybody really understood that we just knew, because our coach wasn't telling us when to go in. and people watching the games didn't know. They thought, this is Leroy's moment right here. He about to go in. It wasn't even like that. We just played long enough to know, this your thing right here. Go ahead and get this.
And you're right, though. I mean, absolutely no jealousy, no ego about it. Like, hey, if Leroy gets it, I'm glad to see Leroy scored a touchdown. And nothing about, any bad feelings that we had. We're just like, the love in that locker room. It was something special.
This is rare that an Ohio State guy and a team of North guys on the same page.
Hold up. Ty, wait 1 minute.
Very interesting choice of clothes too. I like.
We got that 1 week a year. You best believe that 1 week a year, it was till we drop. It was no doubt that we was going at it that whole week. But keep in mind, Minnesota had a lot of Buckeyes.
They did.
Actually.
Yeah.
So I had it coming from
Corey
a bunch
Stringer,
of different angles.
Chris Carter.
Chris Carter, Big K.
Corey Stringer, Big K.
Yep.
Part of it too.
So yeah, but here's another thing. The first radio show I ever did every week was with Robert.
Really?
Yeah. He said, man, what you doing? You ain't got nothing to do. I was just laying around there with the surgeons after I got done. You ain't got no job. You ain't got nothing to do. Come do this radio show with me. It was on Saturdays.
Right? Yeah, it was with Levitard station down there in Miami.
Yeah. Well, I'm still there.
I know you're still there.
You owe Robert 10%, bro.
10%. Hey, so this is one thing that Robert would tell me every day, bar none, every day. And you can tell him, he said these words to me every day since we've known each other. Shh, Leroy, be quiet. Shh. I'm like, man, we've been doing this for 3 years. I know it. Shh, be quiet.
Oh my God.
He's still telling you that.
I mean, talking. Or how about I split my lip for a game from here to here and had to get the Rambo stitches, them stitches with the big sickle. And then when you get back to we were playing Detroit. When we get back to Minnesota, then I went and saw a plastic surgeon. And so I get back into the huddle, and then we get done with the game, and we on the plane. And for some reason, I became the center of everybody's attention because I was still talking. And then, we can't split his lip. I hurt my jaw. I had TMJ. They say,
jeez,
we can't stop him with his jaw. I mean, it's like, man, he is a pro. But I tell you what, I met somebody who made me look like an amateur.
Oh, come on.
We used to play in a golf tournament in Upper Montclair, New Jersey, right? An NFL tournament. And the better you are, the farther you make it, you start playing with the big-time pros. So I played with TreVeyon. And when we got into the locker room, all of the seniors were betting the NFL players on who would talk more. And when we got done, I took a knee in the locker room and I said, I am not worthy. Because he only stopped talking to take a swing. And it might have been because I was nervous playing with him, right? But he only stopped to swing the golf club. And then he continued with his story. And I was standing there in amazement. I'm like, wow, I am not worthy. Because oh my goodness. So that's the only guy.
We need the Lee and Leroy show.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'll end it with this. I don't know how many times this has happened when I've been with somebody on the phone and Leroy's on the other end of the phone, and I end up getting off of the phone. They're like, "Were you talking to somebody?" Like, listening to Leroy.
Probably was listening.
He just got the phone up like this. Yup. For real.
You can set it down and go do something for 10 minutes and come back and you miss nothing.
Okay, yeah.
Hey, man. Hey. That is not necessary. What are you doing here?
That's a little harsh, man.
Leroy,
Thanks,
you're in the right.
I appreciate it.
Hey, you're in the right business, and whoever hires you they're getting a bonus because nobody gets more word for the amount of money that they get paid. Period.
Yeah, he earns it.
By the way, real quick, Robert, before you go, I was looking it up. Leroy's last season in '99 in Minnesota, he had a lot of touchdowns there, a lot of rushing touchdowns. I think he had including the playoffs, I think he had 15, 16 touchdowns, something like that in '99. You only one of your rushing touchdowns was double digits. Did you know that? And do you remember when it was, Leroy?
Only one of my touchdowns was double digits?
Yeah. Double-digit yards, I'm saying. Double-digit yards. But all your touchdowns were 9 yards or less, except for one.
They were Robert's cleanup touchdowns.
Right.
Hey, man.
You see how they do you? See how they do you?
I didn't do this for this.
Wait a second. That's not an insult. You scored a million touchdowns.
You're the closer.
Hold on. Let me think.
That's
Let me
not
think.
an
Let me
insult.
think.
He's the closer.
Let me think. Was it Detroit?
It was a playoff game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you had a 16-yard touchdown.
Would have
Must
been
have
the
been against the
Rams.
Giants. No, it wasn't against the Giants.
The
I
Rams.
don't remember.
Oh, Dallas.
Dallas.
Wait a second.
No, we didn't beat Dallas in the playoffs.
It was against Arizona.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, you want to hear something incredible about that?
Wait a second. Wait a second. I screwed up.
I got a
screwed up.
flight again.
That was
I
the
can't-
season before.
Robert, thank you for joining us, Robert. Catch your flight whenever you want to come back. We were glad to have you on.
My bad.
Thank you so much.
Robert, you're awesome, man. Great to
All right,
see you
man.
again.
Thanks, Robert.
Guys.
Come back during